I discovered my husband had a secret son on the day we landed in Lagos for what was supposed to be our dream family vacation. The humidity hit me like a wall as we stepped off the plane, but it was nothing compared to the suffocating realization that would crush me hours later when a 12-year-old boy called my husband Papa at the airport arrivals gate. My name is Amara. If you had asked me to describe my life before that October morning, I would have painted you a picture of controlled chaos, the beautiful mess of raising 3 children while supporting my husband's medical career. We lived in a comfortable suburb outside Houston, Texas. My husband, Chike, was a respected cardiologist at one of the city's premier hospitals. We had been married for 15 years, together for 17. Our children, twins Zara and Kendi, who were 10, and our son Adaeze, who was 7, were my entire world. I had given up my position as a pharmaceutical sales representative when the twins were born, a decision Chike and I made together. He promised me that his income would be enough, that I could focus on building our home, raising our babies, creating the foundation for our family's success. I believed him. God help me, I believed everything. But before we begin, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you're watching from, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more compelling stories. The trip to Lagos had been Chike's idea, presented to me 6 months earlier over breakfast on a rare Saturday morning when he wasn't on call. The sun streamed through our kitchen windows, illuminating the marble countertops I had spent weeks selecting during our renovation. Chike had looked up from his phone with that smile, the one that still made my stomach flutter after all these years, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes and revealed the dimple in his left cheek. "Amara, my love," he had said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I think it's time we took the children home." Home. He meant Nigeria, specifically Lagos, where he had grown up before coming to the United States for medical school. I had only been once, for our wedding ceremony 15 years ago, a whirlwind week of celebrations, meeting countless relatives, and being overwhelmed by the vibrancy and chaos of a city that never seemed to sleep. Chike had returned several times over the years, always for what he called business conferences or family emergencies. His father had passed away 8 years ago, and he had flown back for the funeral, staying 3 weeks to help his mother settle affairs. His mother, Mama Adaeze, had visited us in Houston twice, both times staying for months, filling our house with her cooking and her stories. "The children need to know their heritage," Chike continued, his voice warm with enthusiasm. "Zara and Kendi are old enough now to really appreciate it. Adaeze needs to see where his father comes from, understand his roots. And you, my dear wife, you need to meet the extended family properly. Not just a rushed wedding celebration, but a real visit. We will stay with my mother, spend time in the village where I was born, show the children the beaches, the markets, everything." I had hesitated, not because I didn't want to go, but because 3 months away from home seemed overwhelming. Chike had insisted it needed to be an extended trip to make it worthwhile, to really immerse the children in the culture. He had already spoken to his practice partners, who agreed he could take the time. Everything was arranged, he assured me. All I had to do was say yes. So I did. I said yes because I loved my husband and wanted our children to understand their father's heritage. I said yes because after 15 years of marriage, I trusted him completely. I said yes because the alternative, questioning his motives, suggesting there might be some hidden reason for this sudden urgency, would have meant acknowledging doubts I refused to entertain. The months of preparation had been exhausting, but exciting. I took the children to get their vaccinations, spent hours researching what to pack, bought mosquito nets and malaria prophylaxis, purchased appropriate clothing for the heat and for visiting elders. Chike had been unusually involved in the planning, specific about certain dates, insistent that we arrive on a particular weekend. He said it was because of a family reunion his mother was organizing, a gathering of his father's relatives across the country. It would be the perfect opportunity for our children to meet everyone at once. I should have questioned why he seemed so anxious as our departure date approached. I should have wondered why he kept checking his phone more frequently than usual, why he sometimes stepped out of the room to take calls, why he became irritable when I asked who had called. but I was too busy managing three excited, nervous children, finishing the endless preparations, arranging for someone to watch our house, to notice the signs that now seem so obvious. The flight had been long, exhausting. We left Houston on a Thursday evening, connected through Atlanta, and flew overnight to Lagos. The children were beside themselves with excitement and anxiety. None of them had ever left the United States. Zara, always the more cautious of the twins, peppered me with questions about everything from whether the toilets would be different to whether anyone would understand her English. Kendi, adventurous and bold, wanted to know if she could try everything, eat all the foods, speak to everyone. Dare, at 7, mostly wanted to know if there would be other children to play with, and if the beaches had big waves. Chike had been strangely quiet during the journey, staring out the window during the long flight across the Atlantic, barely touching his meal. When I asked if he was feeling unwell, he smiled and said he was just tired, looking forward to being home. I had squeezed his hand, understanding what I thought was homesickness, nostalgia for the place that had shaped him. We landed early on a Friday morning. The Lagos airport was chaos in the way that only West African airports can be. People everywhere, noise, heat, the smell of bodies and jet fuel and something else, something indefinably African that I remembered from my first visit. We collected our excessive luggage, mountains of suitcases filled with gifts for relatives and items Mama Adaeze had requested. Chike had been specific about what to bring, particularly a large bag filled with children's clothes and shoes, which I had assumed were for cousins' children. As we emerged from customs into the arrivals area, I was immediately overwhelmed by the crowd. People pressed against barriers, holding signs, shouting names, waving frantically. The noise was incredible. Dare clutched my hand tightly, his eyes wide. The twins stayed close to their father. Chike had gone rigid, his jaw clenched, scanning the crowd with an intensity that made my stomach clench with undefined worry. And then I saw her. A woman, probably in her early 40s, elegant despite the chaos around her, wearing a beautiful Ankara dress in deep purple and gold. She was holding the hand of a boy, maybe 11 or 12 years old, tall for his age, slim, with features that made my breath catch in my throat. Next to them stood Mama Adaeze, Chike's mother, her face revealing nothing, a mask of careful neutrality. The woman saw Chike and her face transformed, breaking into a smile that held too much familiarity, too much history. She released the boy's hand and he darted forward, moving through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew exactly where he was going and who he was going to meet. "Papa!" The boy's voice rang out clear and joyful, cutting through the noise of the arrivals hall. "Papa, you're home!" I felt Chike's entire body go rigid beside me. The word hung in the air between us. Papa. Not uncle, not family friend, not any of the dozen respectful titles children in Nigerian culture might use for an elder. Papa. The boy reached us, and before I could process what was happening, before I could formulate a single coherent thought, he had wrapped his arms around Chike's waist, pressing his face into my husband's chest with the unconscious ease of a child embracing his father, a child who had done this 100 times before, 1,000 times. I watched, frozen, as Chike's hand, the hand that had held mine on the plane just hours ago, the hand that wore the wedding ring I had placed there 15 years ago, lifted slowly, hesitantly, and came to rest on the boy's head. His fingers, those skilled surgeon's fingers, trembled slightly as they touched the boy's hair, and in that gesture, in that single moment of physical connection, I saw the truth that would destroy the foundation of everything I thought I knew. The boy pulled back, looking up at Chike with eyes that were unmistakably, devastatingly familiar. They were the same warm brown as my husband's, set in a face that held his bone structure, his nose, his mouth. This wasn't some distant relative. This wasn't coincidence or my imagination running wild from jet lag and stress. This was Chike's son. My husband had another son. "Papa, Mama said you would bring gifts from America." The boy was speaking quickly, excitedly, his English flawless but accented, switching between English and Yoruba in the way of Nigerian children. "She said you would be here for my birthday this time. You promised last year you would come for my birthday." My throat had closed. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I felt Zara's hand slip into mine, felt her tension, her confusion. She had heard it too. They all had. My children stood there, holding their luggage, staring at this boy who was calling their father Papa, and I could see the questions forming on their faces, could see the moment when Kendi's eyes narrowed, when she began to understand that something was very, very wrong. Chike finally spoke, his voice strangled, barely recognizable. Tobenna, go back to your mother. I will speak with you later. Tobenna. Even his name was perfectly Nigerian, perfectly chosen. The boy's face fell, confusion replacing joy. But Papa, Mama said we would go home together. She said you told her we would all go to Grandmama's house together. She said this time would be different. The woman in the purple dress had reached us now, Mama Adaeze at her side. She looked at me for the first time, and I saw something in her eyes that was not quite pity, not quite triumph, but something between the two. Something that told me she had known this moment was coming, had perhaps even looked forward to it. Chike, she said softly, her voice cultured, educated. You should introduce your wife to your son. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The noise of the airport faded to a distant roar. I looked at my husband, the man I had loved since I was 22 years old, the man I had built a life with, sacrificed for, trusted completely, and he couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, his jaw working, sweat beading on his forehead despite the airport's air conditioning. Chike. My voice came out as a whisper, barely audible even to myself. I tried again, louder. Chike, what is this? Mama Adaeze stepped forward, her face still that careful mask. Amara, my daughter, this is not the place. Come, let us collect ourselves. We will go to the house. Everything will be explained. Explained? I heard my voice rising, hysteria creeping in around the edges. What needs to be explained? That my husband has a son who looks to be about 12 years old? A son he somehow forgot to mention in the 15 years we've been married? People were starting to stare. Nigerians have no shame about watching other people's drama unfold, and we were providing excellent entertainment. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, could hear the whispers starting. Chike finally looked up, and what I saw in his face wasn't the guilt I expected. It was fear, pure, unadulterated terror. Amara, please, he said quietly. Not here. Let's go to the car. I will explain everything. I promise I will explain everything. You promise? I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. Your promises don't seem to mean very much, do they? Zara was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Kendi had moved to stand beside her twin, her arm around her sister's shoulders, her face set in angry lines too adult for a 10-year-old. Dare didn't understand what was happening, but he could sense the tension, the wrongness, and he had begun to cry too, loud sobs that echoed in the cavernous arrivals hall. Tobenna stood between his mother and my husband, his joy completely evaporated, replaced by confusion and growing distress. He looked from Chike to me, to my children, and I could see him trying to work out what he had done wrong, why his father's arrival had turned into this scene of anguish. Come. Mama Adaeze's voice was firm now, brooking no argument. We are making a spectacle. Come to the house. The children need rest. You need rest. We will speak privately. The woman in purple, Tobenna's mother, spoke for the first time since her greeting. Adaeze is right. Come, let us go. Tobenna, help with the luggage. The boy moved to obey, reaching for one of our suitcases, and something in that simple act, in this child who was clearly used to helping, clearly raised to be respectful and useful, broke something inside me. This wasn't his fault. None of this was his fault. He was a child, a boy who loved his father, who was excited to see him, who had done nothing wrong except exist. I bent down to Dare's level, wiping his tears with shaking hands. It's okay, baby. Everything is okay. We're just tired from the long trip. Come on, let's go to Grandmama's house. Dare nodded, hiccuping, not believing me but willing to accept the comfort. I straightened, took both twins' hands, and followed Mama Adaeze toward the exit. I didn't look at Chike. I didn't look at the woman. I didn't look at Tobenna. I just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping my children calm, on not screaming in the middle of Lagos International Airport. We had two vehicles waiting outside, a large SUV and a sedan. Without discussion, without planning, the divide happened naturally. Mama Adaeze, my children, and I got into the SUV. Chike, the woman, and Tobenna got into the sedan. As I climbed into the vehicle, I caught a glimpse of them through the window. Chike sat in the back, Tobenna pressed against his side, the boy's hand clutching his father's shirt. The woman sat in the front, her head turned back to look at them, and even through the tinted glass, I could see the satisfaction on her face. The driver pulled into Lagos traffic, and I stared out the window at a city I barely knew, in a country that wasn't mine, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Mama Adaeze sat beside me, silent. The children were quiet, exhausted from travel and trauma. And I could only replay that moment over and over. Papa, you're home. The joy in that boy's voice, the fear in my husband's eyes, the careful neutrality in my mother-in-law's face that told me she had known. She had known all along. The safe house I thought I had built, the life I thought I knew, the marriage I thought was solid, all of it had been nothing but carefully constructed lies. And I had walked into the trap with my eyes closed, leading my children into it with me, trusting the man who had been deceiving me for over a decade. The SUV navigated through traffic, and I watched Lagos pass by in a blur. Street vendors, crowded buses, cars weaving in and out of lanes with seeming disregard for any traffic laws. The city was awakening, coming alive with morning energy. People going about their lives, their normal Friday morning routines, completely unaware that my entire existence had just shattered. Mama Adaze's house was in Victoria Island, one of the more affluent areas of Lagos. The house itself was beautiful, a sprawling compound surrounded by high walls and a security gate. The architecture was a mix of traditional and modern, with wide verandas and huge windows designed to catch any breeze in the oppressive heat. As the gate swung open and we drove into the compound, I saw that the second vehicle, the sedan carrying my husband and his other family, was already parked. They had arrived first, or perhaps taken a different route. My stomach churned. The driver helped with our luggage, while Mama Adaeze led us into the house. The interior was cool, blessedly air-conditioned, filled with comfortable furniture and family photographs that I now looked at with new eyes. How many of these pictures included Tobenna? Had I simply not noticed on the handful of video calls we'd had over the years, or had they been carefully curated to keep him hidden from view? "The children's room is upstairs," Mama Adaeze said, her voice neutral, still giving nothing away. "Amara, I have prepared the master suite for you and Chike. Perhaps you would like to freshen up, rest. The children need to eat, to sleep." "Where is my husband?" The words came out flat, emotionless. I was beyond anger now, in some strange state of shock where everything seemed distant and unreal. "In the sitting room with Obiageli and Tobenna." So that was her name. Obiageli. "Amara, please, take time to settle. The conversation we need to have should not happen when you are exhausted, when the children are distressed." "Explained?" I heard my voice rising, hysteria creeping in around the edges. "What needs to be explained? That my husband has a son? A son who looks to be about 12 years old? A son he somehow forgot to mention in the 15 years we've been married?" People were starting to stare. Nigerians have no shame about watching other people's drama unfold, and we were providing excellent entertainment. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, could hear the whispers starting. Chike finally looked up, and what I saw in his face wasn't the guilt I expected. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated terror. "Amara, please," he said quietly. "Not here. Let's go to the car. I will explain everything. I promise I will explain everything." "You promise?" I laughed, and it sounded unhinged, even to my own ears. "Your promises don't seem to mean very much, do they?" Zara was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Kendi had moved to stand beside her twin, her arm around her sister's shoulders. her face set in angry lines too adult for a 10-year-old. Dare didn't understand what was happening, but he could sense the tension, the wrongness, and he had begun to cry too, loud sobs that echoed in the cavernous arrivals hall. Tobenna stood between his mother and my husband, his joy completely evaporated, replaced by confusion and growing distress. He looked from Chike to me to my children, and I could see him trying to work out what he had done wrong, why his father's arrival had turned into this scene of anguish. Come. Mama Adaze's voice was firm now, brooking no argument. We are making a spectacle. Come to the house. The children need rest. You need rest. We will speak privately. The woman in purple, Tobenna's mother, spoke for the first time since her greeting. Adaeze is right. Come, let us go. Tobenna, help with the luggage. The boy moved to obey, reaching for one of our suitcases, and something in that simple act, in this child who was clearly used to helping, clearly raised to be respectful and useful, broke something inside me. This wasn't his fault. None of this was his fault. He was a child, a boy who loved his father, who was excited to see him, who had done nothing wrong except exist. I bent down to Dare's level, wiping his tears with shaking hands. It's okay, baby. Everything is okay. We're just tired from the long trip. Come on, let's go to Grandmama's house. Dare nodded, hiccuping, not believing me, but willing to accept the comfort. I straightened, took both twins' hands, and followed Mama Adaeze toward the exit. I didn't look at Chike. I didn't look at the woman. I didn't look at Tobenna. I just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping my children calm, on not screaming in the middle of Lagos International Airport. We had two vehicles waiting outside, a large SUV and a sedan. Without discussion, without planning, the divide happened naturally. Mama Adaeze, my children, and I got into the SUV. Chike, the woman, and Tobenna got into the sedan. As I climbed into the vehicle, I caught a glimpse of them through the window. Chike sat in the back, Tobenna pressed against his side, the boy's hand clutching his father's shirt. The woman sat in the front, her head turned back to look at them, and even through the tinted glass, I could see the satisfaction on her face. The driver pulled into Lagos traffic, and I stared out the window at a city I barely knew, in a country that wasn't mine, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Mama Adaeze sat beside me, silent. The children were quiet, exhausted from travel and trauma, and I could only replay that moment over and over. Papa, you're home. The joy in that boy's voice, the fear in my husband's eyes, the careful neutrality in my mother-in-law's face that told me she had known all along. The safe house I thought I had built, the life I thought I knew, the marriage I thought was solid, all of it had been nothing but carefully constructed lies. And I had walked into the trap with my eyes closed, leading my children into it with me, trusting the man who had been deceiving me for over a decade. The SUV navigated through traffic, and I watched Lagos pass by in a blur. Street vendors, crowded buses, cars weaving in and out of lanes with seeming disregard for any traffic laws. The city was awakening, coming alive with morning energy. People going about their lives, their normal Friday morning routines, completely unaware that my entire existence had just shattered. Mama Adaze's house was in Victoria Island, one of the more affluent areas of Lagos. The house itself was beautiful, a sprawling compound surrounded by high walls and a security gate. The architecture was a mix of traditional and modern, with wide verandas and huge windows designed to catch any breeze in the oppressive heat. As the gate swung open and we drove into the compound, I saw that the second vehicle, the sedan carrying my husband and his other family, was already parked. They had arrived first, or perhaps taken a different route. My stomach churned. The driver helped with our luggage, while Mama Adaeze led us into the house. The interior was cool, blessedly air-conditioned, filled with comfortable furniture and family photographs that I now looked at with new eyes. How many of these pictures included Tobenna? Had I simply not noticed on the handful of video calls we'd had over the years, or had they been carefully curated to keep him hidden from view? The children's room is upstairs, Mama Adaeze said, her voice neutral, still giving nothing away. Amara, I have prepared the master suite for you and Chike. Perhaps you would like to freshen up, rest. The children need to eat, to sleep. Where is my husband? The words came out flat, emotionless. I was beyond anger now, in some strange state of shock where everything seemed distant and unreal. In the sitting room with Obiageli and Tobenna. So that was her name. Obiageli. Amara, please, take time to settle. The conversation we need to have should not happen when you are exhausted, when the children are distressed. Explained? I heard my voice rising, hysteria creeping in around the edges. What needs to be explained? That my husband has a son? A son who looks to be about 12 years old? A son he somehow forgot to mention in the 15 years we've been married? People were starting to stare. Nigerians have no shame about watching other people's drama unfold, and we were providing excellent entertainment. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, could hear the whispers starting. Chike finally looked up, and what I saw in his face wasn't the guilt I expected. It was fear, pure, unadulterated terror. Amara, please, he said quietly. Not here. Let's go to the car. I will explain everything. I promise I will explain everything. You promise? I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. Your promises don't seem to mean very much, do they? Zara was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Kendi had moved to stand beside her twin, her arm around her sister's shoulders, her face set in angry lines too adult for a 10-year-old. Dare didn't understand what was happening, but he could sense the tension, the wrongness, and he had begun to cry too, loud sobs that echoed in the cavernous arrivals hall. Tobenna stood between his mother and my husband, his joy completely evaporated, replaced by confusion and growing distress. He looked from Chike to me to my children, and I could see him trying to work out what he had done wrong, why his father's arrival had turned into this scene of anguish. Come. Mama Adaeze's voice was firm now, brooking no argument. We are making a spectacle. Come to the house. The children need rest. You need rest. We will speak privately. The woman in purple, Tobenna's mother, spoke for the first time since her greeting. Adaeze is right. Come, let us go. Tobenna, help with the luggage. I dried off and dressed carefully in a simple outfit I had packed, knowing I would need to look respectable for meeting relatives. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was dressing to meet my husband's mistress and her son, with all the care I would have given to meeting his business partners. When I emerged from the master suite 30 minutes later, I was calm. Cold, but calm. I found Mama Adaeze waiting in the hallway. She studied my face and nodded once, approving of whatever she saw there. They are in the sitting room. The children, Tobenna and yours, are in the kitchen with the house girl. I have told them there are cookies and milk. How thoughtful. My voice was acid. Cookies and milk while their parents discuss the dissolution of their family structure. Mama Adaeze flinched, but said nothing. She led me down the stairs and through the house to a formal sitting room. It was decorated in the style of wealthy Nigerians, with heavy wooden furniture, family portraits, and expensive decorations. Chike sat on one of the sofas, his head in his hands. The woman, Obiageli, sat across from him, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had changed into a more casual outfit, but still looked elegant, composed. I chose a chair separate from both of them, positioning myself where I could see both their faces clearly. Mama Adaeze sat to my right, a witness to whatever confession was about to unfold. Talk. My voice was steady, neutral. Start from the beginning. And if you lie to me, if I sense even once that you're not telling me the complete truth, I will take my children and leave this house. I will go to a hotel, and you will never see me or them again. Do you understand? Chike nodded miserably. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Obiageli, and something passed between them, some silent communication. Let me, Obiageli said quietly. Her voice was educated, her English perfect. Let me tell it, since he seems unable to. Fine. I kept my eyes on her. Tell me how you destroyed my marriage. She didn't flinch at the accusation. I did not destroy your marriage, Amara. Your marriage was never what you thought it was. Enlighten me. She took a breath. Chike and I met when he returned for his father's funeral. You remember 8 years ago. He was here for 3 weeks. 8 years ago. Tobenna was 12. The math worked perfectly. Horribly, perfectly. Go on. We had known each other before. I was his girlfriend in university before he left for America. First love, you understand. When he came back for the funeral, we reconnected. She said it delicately, but there was no delicate way to describe adultery. It was not planned. We were both emotional. His father had just died. I had recently ended a relationship. It happened. It happened. I repeated her words back to her, flat and emotionless. Adultery just happened. A betrayal of vows just happened. Yes. She met my eyes, not apologizing. I became pregnant. I did not know immediately. When I found out, I told Chike. He was already back in America, back with you. I looked at my husband. He had his head buried in his hands again, his shoulders shaking, crying. The coward was crying while his mistress told me how they had created a child while he was supposed to be mourning his father. What did he say when you told him? He was shocked, panicked, but he is not a man who shirks his responsibilities. There was something almost proud in how she said it, and I felt rage flare hot in my chest. He told me he could not leave you. You were his wife. You had just had the twins, but he would provide for his son. He would be a father in whatever way he could. How generous of him. The sarcasm dripped from every word. So he decided to have 2 families, one in America that knew nothing, and one in Nigeria that got to see him multiple times a year on his frequent business trips. Yes. She said it simply, without shame. That is what he decided. And you agreed to this? To being his mistress? To your son being a secret? For the first time, emotion flashed across her face. Anger. I had little choice. I was pregnant with a married man's child. In our society, this is a shameful thing. Chike offered to help me, to support us financially, to be present in Tobenna's life as much as he could. Many men would have denied the child entirely, would have paid to make the problem disappear. He did not do that. What a prince! I turned my gaze to Chike. Look at me. He raised his head slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, tears streaking down his face. He looked broken, but I felt no sympathy. None. You came home from your father's funeral and climbed into bed with me with your mistress's child growing in her womb. You held our babies, you made love to me, you told me you loved me, and all the while you knew you had another child coming. Is that correct? Amara, Is that correct? I cut him off, my voice sharp. Yes. It came out as a whisper. And then, for the next 12 years, you lied to me. Every single day. Every time you said you had a conference in Nigeria. Every time you said you had a medical emergency to attend to. Every time you kissed me goodbye at the airport, you were lying. Correct? Yes. And the money. How much money have you been sending them? He swallowed hard. About $5,000 a month. For Tobenna's school, his expenses, for Obiageli's rent, her $5,000 a month. I interrupted him, my mind reeling. That's $60,000 a year, for 12 years. I did the math. $720,000. You have sent almost $750,000 to support your secret family, while I clipped coupons and shopped sales to stay within the household budget you gave me. Chike's face went gray. Obiageli shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. And your mother. I turned to Mama Adaeze. You knew about this. All along, you knew. The older woman nodded slowly. Yes, I knew. And you said nothing. You came to my house, you held my children, you ate at my table, and you said nothing. He is my son, Mama Adaeze said quietly. Tobenna is my grandson. What would you have me do? Tell me the truth. My control was slipping, my voice rising. You could have told me the truth. You could have given me the choice to decide whether I wanted to stay married to a man who was living a double life. And if I had told you, Mama Adaeze said, her voice sad, what would you have done? You would have left him, divorced him. The twins were babies. Dare was not yet born. You would have taken those children away from their father, from their heritage, from their grandmother. I could not do that. So you chose his lies over my right to know the truth. I chose my family, she said simply. All of my family. The room fell silent. I looked around at these three people who had conspired to keep me in the dark for over a decade, and I felt something inside me go very, very cold. The hurt was still there, the betrayal, the rage, but underneath it all was something harder, something calculating. Why now? I asked, looking at Chike. Why bring us here now? Why expose everything? He glanced at Obiageli, and she answered for him. Because Tobenna is getting older, he has been asking questions. Why his father lives in America, why he cannot visit, why he sees him only a few times a year, why his father has never told his other family about him. She paused. And because I am tired, tired of being the secret, tired of my son being the secret. I told Chike that either he told you or I would. So this was an ultimatum. Yes, she met my eyes steadily. I have been patient for 12 years. I have accepted my position. But my son deserves more. He deserves to know his siblings. He deserves to be acknowledged. How noble. I stood up, unable to sit any longer. You want your son to be acknowledged, so you arranged for this revelation to happen in the worst possible way. In an airport, in front of my children, in a country where I have no support, no resources, no way to easily leave. Obiageli's eyes flickered. She had not expected me to see through to that strategic element. You trapped me here. I looked at Chike. Both of you. You brought me here knowing that once I knew, I would be stuck. Stuck because leaving immediately would be complicated with 3 children. Stuck because you knew I wouldn't want to cause more trauma by fleeing in chaos. Stuck because here, in your mother's house, in your country, you have all the power. It's not like that, Chike said desperately. Amara, I brought you here because I wanted us to be together. All of us. I want my children to know each other. You want. I cut him off viciously. You want. What about what I want? What about what our children need? What about the trust you destroyed, the vows you broke, the years you stole from me with your lies? I know I have hurt you. I know I have done terrible things. But Amara, I love you. I have always loved you. Obiageli and I, it's not like that between us. We are not together. I am not in love with her. She is the mother of my son, and I support them. But you are my wife. You are the one I love. I looked at him, this man I had loved for 17 years, and felt absolutely nothing but contempt. You think that makes it better? That you've been lying to me, deceiving me, maintaining a secret family, but it's okay because you're not in love with her? I know it sounds like you want to have everything. My voice was ice. You want me at home, raising your children, keeping your house, warming your bed. And you want her here, giving you another son, another life you can step into whenever you visit. You want both families, both lives, with none of the consequences of your choices. What do you want me to say? His voice broke on a sob. What can I say to make this better? Nothing. The word hung in the air. There is nothing you can say, nothing you can do. You have destroyed 15 years of marriage with your lies. So you will leave me? His eyes were wide with panic. You will take my children and leave? I looked at him for a long moment, and in that moment, something crystallized in my mind. I thought about my 3 children upstairs, probably not eating the cookies and milk, probably crying or sitting in stunned silence. I thought about Tobenna in the kitchen, a child who had done nothing wrong except have a father who made selfish, cruel choices. I thought about my life in Houston, the beautiful house that was in Chike's name, the cars that were in Chike's name, the bank accounts I had no access to beyond the household money he deposited monthly. I thought about the fact that I had given up my career, had no recent work experience, had spent 15 years out of the job market. I thought about the fact that divorce would mean legal battles, custody fights, financial ruin potentially. I thought about $750,000 spent on a secret family while I shopped at discount stores. And I realized that if I reacted the way they expected, if I screamed and cried and demanded immediate divorce, I would be the one who lost everything. I would be the scorned wife who abandoned her husband over a youthful mistake. In Nigerian culture, in Chike's family, there would be pressure to forgive, to understand, to accept that men make mistakes. If I left immediately in anger, I would be the unreasonable American wife who couldn't accept Nigerian realities. No, I needed time. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions about what came next. I don't know what I'm going to do, I said slowly, watching his face. I need time to process this, time to think. Hope flickered in his eyes. Yes, yes, take time. We will talk. I will explain everything. I will show you that we can work through this. I said nothing to that. I looked at Obiageli. Does Tobenna know about us? About my children? He knows his father lives in America. He knows he has a wife there and children. But he does not know you are here. He does not know he just met his siblings. She paused. I think he suspected at the airport. He is a perceptive child. What did you tell him about why his father cannot be with him full time? She shifted, uncomfortable for the first time. I told him his father has important work in America, that he provides for us from there. You told him his father chose work over him. I told him the truth. Chike has obligations in America. We knew that from the beginning. I nodded slowly, another victim of Chike's selfishness. A boy who had spent 12 years wondering why his father chose to live an ocean away, not knowing that his father had simply chosen to maintain two separate lives rather than deal with the consequences of his actions. I need to check on my children. I moved toward the door. We will continue this conversation later. Amara. Chike stood up. Please. Tell me you will consider staying. Consider working through this. I looked back at him. What I will consider is what is best for my children. That's all I can promise you right now. I left the sitting room, my legs shaking, and climbed the stairs to my children's room. They were not eating the cookies. As I suspected, they were huddled together on one of the beds, Zara and Kendi holding Dare between them. All three looked up when I entered, their faces showing the same expression of anxious hope. Is it true? Kendi asked, always the brave one. Does Daddy have another son? I sat on the bed and gathered all three into my arms. Yes, baby, it's true. How? Zara's voice was small. How does Daddy have another son? When you were very little, when you were babies, Daddy made a very bad choice. He spent time with another woman, and she became pregnant with that little boy we saw at the airport. Tobenna, Dare said softly. His name is Tobenna. Yes, his name is Tobenna, and he's about 2 years older than you girls. Does he live here? In Nigeria? Kendi's quick mind was already working through the implications. Yes, he lives here with his mother. So all those times Daddy came to Nigeria for work. Zara didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. She understood. He was coming to see them. Yes. We sat in silence for a moment, the four of us processing this new reality. Finally, Dare spoke, his 7-year-old voice cutting through to the heart of the matter. Are you and Daddy going to get divorced? I took a shaky breath. I don't know yet, baby. Maybe. I need to think about it. Where will we live if you get divorced? Zara asked, fear creeping into her voice. We will live in our house in Houston. Nothing will change where you live. But Daddy lives there too, Kendi pointed out. If we get divorced, Daddy might have to find somewhere else to live. Good, Kendi said fiercely. He should leave. He's the one who did bad things. I squeezed her tight. I know you're angry, sweetheart. I am too. But we need to take time to figure out what's best for everyone. What about Tobenna? Dare asked. Is he our brother? The question hung in the air. Technically, yes, Tobenna was their half-brother, but acknowledging that felt like accepting this whole twisted situation as normal, as something that could be integrated into our lives. Biologically, yes, he is your half-brother, but relationships are more than biology. Right now, I need you three to focus on each other, on being there for each other. The Tobenna situation is something we'll figure out later. We stayed like that for a long time, the four of us holding each other in that strange room in a house that should have been a haven but felt like a trap. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them. The twins lay down, still holding hands, and Dare curled up between them. I sat with them until their breathing evened out, until I was sure they were asleep. Then I went to the master suite and began to methodically go through my options. I needed facts. I needed to understand the full extent of Chike's deception. I needed to know what I was truly dealing with before I could plan my next move. I found his laptop in his carry-on luggage. He had not bothered to lock it, so confident that I would never invade his privacy. I opened it and began to search. Email accounts, bank statements, any evidence I could find of the scope of his double life. What I found over the next several hours would prove to be both worse than I imagined and exactly what I needed to take back control of my life and protect my children's future. His email inbox was a revelation of casual cruelty. I sat on the bed with his laptop, my hands trembling as I scrolled through years of correspondence. There were hundreds of emails to Obiageli, dating back 13 years. I opened them chronologically, watching the evolution of their relationship unfold in digital text. The earliest emails were from when Obiageli first told him she was pregnant. His response had been panic mixed with cold calculation. He wrote about how he couldn't leave me because our twins were only months old, because his career in Houston was just taking off, because divorce would destroy him financially. But he promised to support the child, promised to be present as much as possible. He begged her not to tell me, not to contact me, not to destroy what he had built in America. Her responses were heartbreaking. A woman desperately in love with a man who was choosing another life over her, but trying to accept whatever scraps of attention he could offer. She agreed to his terms. She would raise their child alone. She would never contact his American family. In exchange, he would provide financially and visit as often as he could manage. The emails continued through Tobenna's birth, his first steps, his first day of school. Chike responded to each milestone with what seemed like genuine emotion, genuine love for this son he was keeping secret. There were photos attached to many emails. Tobenna as a newborn, as a toddler, as a young boy growing into the child I had seen at the airport. In some photos, Chike was present, holding his son, smiling with the same joy I had seen in pictures of him with our children. He had been living parallel lives with parallel joy, never letting one family know about the other. But it was the financial documents that truly revealed the extent of his deception. I found bank statements for accounts I had never known existed. The $5,000 a month he sent to Obiageli was just the beginning. There were records of school fees paid for an expensive international school in Lagos, medical bills, a car purchased in Obiageli's name, rent payments for an apartment in a nice area of the city. Over the years, the amount totaled not $720,000 as I had initially calculated, but closer to $1.2 million when I included all the extras, the gifts, the special expenses. $1.2 million. While I had been cutting coupons and buying our children's clothes on sale, while I had given up my career and my financial independence to raise his family, he had been supporting an entirely separate household with money I didn't even know we had. But what made my blood run cold was finding another set of emails from the past 6 months. These were between Chike and a lawyer in Houston. He had been planning something he hadn't discussed with me. I opened the attachments and read through legal documents that made my vision blur with rage. Chike had been preparing to divorce me, not immediately, but eventually. The lawyer had laid out a strategy for maximizing Chike's financial position in a divorce. The plan was to slowly move assets into accounts I couldn't access, to document any spending I did that could be framed as excessive, to build a case that I was financially irresponsible and that the children would be better off primarily with him. The timeline suggested he was planning to initiate divorce proceedings within the next year. But then, there was a more recent email, from just 2 months ago, where the plan had changed. Chike had written to his lawyer that he wanted to pause the divorce preparation. He had a new idea. He would bring me to Nigeria with the children, orchestrate the revelation about Tobenna, and then suggest that the solution was for all of us to become one blended family. He wrote, and I read it 3 times to be sure I wasn't hallucinating, that once I was in Nigeria, away from my support system, traumatized by the revelation, I would be more likely to accept whatever arrangement he proposed. He could have his American wife and his Nigerian family under one roof, managed by his mother, all living together in some twisted version of polygamy that he seemed to think I would eventually accept out of sheer helplessness. The lawyer had advised against this plan, pointing out multiple ways it could backfire, but Chike had been insistent. He had written that he knew me, knew I would be devastated, but ultimately would do what was best for the children, and in his mind, what was best was keeping the family together at any cost. I sat back, the laptop screen blurring as tears of rage filled my eyes. He had planned this, all of it. The surprise trip, the timing, the location, everything had been orchestrated to put me in the most vulnerable position possible, so he could manipulate me into accepting a life as part of his personal harem. A sound at the door made me look up. Mama Adaeze stood in the doorway, her face carefully neutral as always. But her eyes flickered to the laptop in my hands, and I saw understanding dawn. "You found his emails," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Did you know about this plan? About bringing me here to trap me into accepting his bigamy fantasy?" She was silent for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. "I knew he was bringing you here to reveal Tobenna. I did not know about the rest. About the lawyer, about his plans for divorce or for blending the families here. But you helped him. You knew about Obiageli and Tobenna all these years and said nothing." "Yes." She came into the room, closing the door behind her. "I knew and I said nothing. But Amara, you must understand the position I was in." "Must I?" My voice was bitter. "Explain to me why you chose to protect your son's lies instead of protecting your grandchildren from having their family destroyed." Mama Adaeze sat in the chair near the window, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. "When Chike told me about Obiageli's pregnancy, I was devastated. I had met you, liked you, believed you were good for my son. But the child was coming. Tobenna was coming. And in our culture, a child cannot be abandoned. The son must take responsibility. So he took responsibility by lying to everyone. What would you have had him do? Divorce you when you had just given birth to twins? Abandon his Nigerian son entirely? There was no good choice, Amara, only degrees of bad ones. He could have told me the truth. We could have decided together how to handle it. And you would have left him. You know you would have." "Yes," I said fiercely, "I would have. And that would have been my right. Instead, he stole that choice from me. He stole 13 years of my life, keeping me in a marriage under false pretenses." "Yes." Mama Adaze's voice was soft. "He did, and I helped him do it. For that, I am sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back those years. Sorry doesn't undo the damage to my children. No, it does not." She looked at me directly. "What will you do now?" I looked down at the laptop, at the damning evidence of my husband's calculated betrayal. What did he think I would do? Did he really believe I would just accept living here as some kind of sister wife to Obiageli? I think he believed you would not want to uproot the children again, that you would choose stability over pride. He confused my love for my children with weakness. I closed the laptop carefully. He made a fatal mistake. Mama Adaeze studied my face. "You have a plan." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm developing one." "Amara, please, before you act in anger, consider—" "I'm not acting in anger." My voice was cold, controlled. "I'm acting in self-preservation. There's a difference." She stood slowly. "If you decide to leave him, to return to America with the children, I will not stop you. Despite everything, despite my loyalty to my son, I understand that what he has done is unforgivable." How generous. "But I ask one thing. Tobenna is innocent in all of this. He is a child who loves his father. Whatever anger you have, whatever revenge you plan, please do not punish that boy for the sins of his parents." I looked at her for a long moment. I would never hurt a child, not even the child of my husband's betrayal. But don't expect me to embrace him as family either. He's a victim of your son's selfishness, just like my children are. Just like I am. She nodded and left the room, leaving me alone with the evidence of my husband's crimes. I sat for a long time, thinking through my options with a clarity I hadn't felt since stepping off that plane. Chike had made careful plans to trap me. Now I would make even more careful plans to free myself and my children. The first thing I needed was access to money. I opened my phone and called my bank in Houston. It was the middle of the night there, but their customer service line was 24 hours. When the representative answered, I told her I needed to check the balance on our joint checking account. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that account shows as closed." My stomach dropped. Closed? When? It was closed 3 weeks ago. According to our records, a new account was opened in just Mr. Chike's name, and the funds were transferred there. 3 weeks ago, right before our trip. He had cut off my access to even the household money. He had isolated me financially before bringing me here. The calculation of it was breathtaking. And our savings account? That account was also closed and the funds transferred. I can only see that Mr. Chike opened new accounts. I don't have authorization to give you information about those. Those are joint accounts. I should have access. I understand your frustration, ma'am, but both accounts were opened as joint accounts with right of survivorship. Either party can close them without the other's consent. If you'd like to dispute this, you'll need to speak with our legal department during business hours. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking with rage. He had cut me off completely. I checked our credit cards next. All declined. He had closed those too, or suspended them. I had no access to money, no way to pay for flights home, no ability to get a hotel if I wanted to leave this house. I was exactly as trapped as he had intended me to be. But Chike had made one crucial mistake. He had forgotten that I was once a pharmaceutical sales representative, which meant I was once very good at reading people, at negotiating, at finding leverage. And he had left his laptop unlocked, which meant I now had access to all his financial accounts, all his passwords, all the evidence I needed to prove exactly what he had done. I spent the next several hours taking screenshots of everything, the emails with Obiageli, the financial transfers, the correspondence with his lawyer about the divorce strategy, the evidence of the accounts he had opened and closed, every piece of documentation that showed his calculated betrayal and financial abuse. I uploaded all of it to a cloud storage account he didn't know about, one I had created when I worked and never thought I'd need again. Then I began to look more carefully at his financial situation. The picture that emerged was complex. Chike had been earning significantly more than I realized. His income from the hospital was substantial, but he also had investments, rental properties back in Nigeria that I had never known about, and a consulting business on the side. His net worth was somewhere in the range of $3 to $4 million, none of which I had access to, and most of which he had systematically hidden from me. But he had also been careless. In his arrogance, he had kept everything documented. Every asset was traceable. Every transfer of funds to Obiageli created a paper trail. Every secret account had been funded from our joint income during our marriage, which meant it was marital property regardless of whose name was on it. He had built a comprehensive record of financial infidelity that any competent divorce attorney would be able to use to destroy him in court. A knock on the door interrupted my research. "Come in," I called, quickly minimizing the browser windows. It was Obiageli. She stood in the doorway, her earlier confidence replaced with something that looked almost like nervousness. "May I speak with you?" I gestured to the chair Mama Adaeze had vacated. "Why not? Everyone else seems to be entitled to my time today." She winced at the sharpness in my tone, but sat down. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, two women bound by one man's selfishness. Up close, I could see that she was beautiful in a way that I was not. Tall, elegant, with features that would turn heads anywhere. I understood suddenly why Chike had been attracted to her. and that understanding made everything worse somehow. I want to explain something, she began, about why I agreed to Chike's plan to bring you here. You mean his plan to trap me? Yes, she didn't deny it. That is what it was, a trap, but not for the reasons you think. Enlighten me. She took a breath. For 13 years, I have been the secret, the woman in the shadows. My son has been denied his father's full presence, denied his siblings, denied his place in his father's life. I accepted this because I loved Chike, because I was young and stupid and believed that he would eventually leave you and come back to me. But he didn't. No, he did not. Year after year he made excuses. The children were too young, his career was too important, the timing was not right, and I waited like a fool. So you decided to force the issue? Yes. She met my eyes. 6 months ago I told Chike that I was finished waiting, that either he told you about Tobenna, or I would. I would contact you directly. I would send you photos. I would make sure you knew what kind of man you were married to. And he panicked. He did. He came up with this plan. Bring you here, tell you in person, convince you to accept the situation. He told me that you were a kind woman, a good mother, that you would understand once you met Tobenna, once you saw that he was just a child who needed his father. He miscalculated. Spectacularly. For the first time, something like a smile crossed her face. But Amara, I need you to understand something. I am not your enemy. How are you not my enemy? Because I am as much a victim of his lies as you are. Her voice was firm now, passionate. He told me he would leave you. He told me we would be together. He made me promises, made me believe in a future that he never intended to deliver. I gave him 13 years of my life, raised his son alone, accepted scraps of his time and attention, all because I believed his lies. At least you knew he was married. I didn't even know you existed. Yes, she nodded. That is true, but we are both women who loved a man who is a coward and a liar. We are both women who have been used and manipulated. We are both women whose children have been hurt by his selfishness. In that, we are the same. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to blame her for the destruction of my marriage, for the pain my children were in. But looking at her face, seeing the genuine pain and regret there, I found I couldn't summon the energy. She was right. We were both victims. The enemy was Chike. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you are planning something. I saw your face when you came out of the sitting room earlier. I saw calculation there, not just pain. And I want you to know that whatever you plan to do, I will help you. Why would you help me? Because I am tired of being a secret. I am tired of my son suffering. And most of all, I am tired of Chike thinking he can manipulate everyone around him to serve his needs. She leaned forward. I want him to face consequences, real consequences, for what he has done to both of us. Destroy him, his reputation, his career, possibly his ability to practice medicine? Yes, her voice was hard. It would. And after 13 years of being his dirty little secret, I find I am perfectly fine with that. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, of some hidden agenda. But all I saw was a woman who had reached the end of her patience, who was ready to burn down everything rather than continue living in the shadows. I need to think about this. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. Of course. She stood. But Amara, please believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt your children. I just wanted my son to have his father. Your son will be hurt by this too. If Chike's reputation is destroyed, if he loses his medical license or his income, that affects Tobenna. I know. Her voice was sad. But my son is already hurt. He has spent his whole life as a secret, wondering why he is not good enough for his father to acknowledge openly. Perhaps it is better for him to see the truth now, to understand that the problem was never him. It was always his father's cowardice. After she left, I sat with this new information, this unexpected alliance. Obiageli's willingness to help was a weapon I had not anticipated having. Combined with the evidence I had gathered from Cheek's laptop, I had everything I needed to destroy him legally and financially. But I needed to think carefully about what I wanted. Revenge was satisfying to contemplate, but I had 3 children to consider. What outcome would be best for them? I checked on my children again. They were still sleeping, exhausted by emotion and jet lag. Looking at their faces, peaceful in sleep, I felt my resolve harden. They deserved better than this. They deserved a father who put their needs first, who didn't lie and manipulate and betray. If Chike could not be that father, then they were better off without him actively in their lives. Over the next 3 days, I played the role Chike expected me to play. I was quiet, withdrawn, seemingly devastated and unsure. I stayed in my room or with my children, avoiding contact with Chike as much as possible. When I did speak to him, I was neither angry nor forgiving, just numb. I let him believe I was processing, trying to decide whether I could forgive him. Meanwhile, I was making careful plans. I contacted a divorce attorney in Houston via email, using the evidence I had gathered to explain my situation. The attorney, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in complex divorce cases, responded within hours. She confirmed what I suspected. Everything Chike had hidden during our marriage was marital property. His attempt to move assets and close accounts before revealing his affair could be seen as financial abuse and dissipation of marital assets. The courts would not look kindly on his behavior. More importantly, she told me that Texas was a community property state. I was entitled to half of everything, including all the money he had sent to Obiageli during our marriage. Patricia's advice was clear. I needed to get back to the United States as quickly as possible. The longer I stayed in Nigeria, the more time Chike had to manipulate the situation. She would file for divorce immediately upon my return, and she would file for emergency orders freezing all assets and preventing Chike from transferring or hiding any more money. But I needed to move fast. The problem was money. I had no access to funds for plane tickets, but I did have something valuable. I had Cheek's laptop password and access to his accounts. On the 4th day of my stay in Nigeria, while Chike was out of the house visiting some relatives with his mother and Tobenna, I logged into one of his accounts and transferred $50,000 to my old personal account from before our marriage, one he didn't know still existed because I had stopped using it years ago. It was theft, legally speaking, but it was theft of marital assets that I was entitled to anyway. I could justify it to a judge, if necessary. With money secured, I booked flights home for myself and the children, leaving 2 days later. Then I did something that surprised even me. I went to find Obiageli. She was in her apartment, which was a 30-minute drive from Mama Adaeze's house. I took a taxi, leaving my children with the house girl, telling no one where I was going. Her apartment was nice, in a secure building in Victoria Island. She was surprised to see me, but invited me in. Tobenna was at school, she explained. We sat in her living room, and I looked around at this space that Chike had paid for, that he had visited regularly, where he had played father to his secret son. I'm leaving, I told her directly. I'm taking my children back to Houston in 2 days. Her face remained neutral. And Chike? I'm divorcing him. I'm going to take him for everything he's worth legally, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did. Good, she said it firmly. What do you need from me? I need your testimony. Everything you know about your relationship with him, documented and notarized. I need proof that he has been supporting you throughout our marriage. I need you to be willing to testify in court if necessary. I will do it. All of it. You understand this will destroy him? His reputation, his career, possibly his ability to practice medicine? Yes. Her voice was hard. I understand, and I am ready for that. What about Tobenna? What about the money Chike has been sending? If I take him for everything, there won't be anything left for you. She smiled, and it was bitter. Amara, I have a master's degree in business administration. I have been working part-time so I could be available when Chike visited, but I can work full-time. I can support my son and myself. We will survive. We do not need his money. We never did. I accepted it because it was the price of his presence. but I am done with that bargain. I'm going to fight for full custody of my children. I'm going to argue that Chike is an unfit parent based on his lies and financial abuse. Then I will support that argument. I will testify that he is a man who puts his own desires above the well-being of his children, that he lied to everyone, manipulated everyone, hurt everyone to maintain his comfortable dual existence. We looked at each other, and I saw understanding pass between us. We were two women who had been played against each other by one man's ego. Now we were joining forces to take that man down. I'm sorry, I said suddenly, for thinking you were the villain in this. You're not. You're just another person he hurt. And I am sorry, she replied, for believing that I could have a man who belonged to someone else, for thinking that love justified deception. I have taught my son terrible lessons about relationships through my choices. That is something I will have to live with. Your son seems like a good kid. That's because of you, not despite you. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you for saying that. I left her apartment with a promise that she would have the documentation prepared and notarized within 24 hours. I returned to Mama Adaze's house to find Chike waiting for me, his face creased with worry. Where were you? No one knew where you went. I was worried. I went for a drive. I needed to think. Amara, we need to talk. Really talk. You have been avoiding me for days. Fine, let's talk. We went to the master suite. Chike closed the door and turned to me with an expression of desperate hope. Have you made a decision? About us? About staying? I have. And? I'm going to forgive you. The relief that flooded his face was almost painful to witness. He reached for me, pulling me into an embrace that I forced myself to accept without flinching. Thank you. Thank you, my love. I promise you I will make this right. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. I know you will. I pulled back, looking into his eyes. But I need some things from you first, to rebuild trust. Anything. Name it. I need access to our accounts again, all of them. Joint access, not just an allowance. He hesitated, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, but he nodded. Of course. I will add you to everything. And I need a credit card that I can use for household expenses while we're here. Yes. I will give you one today. And I think I should take the children home early. This has been traumatic for them. They need to be back in their normal environment. You can stay here, continue visiting with Tobenna, and then come home in a few weeks. It will give everyone space to process. This time, the hesitation was longer. I don't know if we should separate right now. We should be together, working through this as a family. Chike, my children are devastated. They need to go home. I need to take them home. You have Tobenna here who you barely get to see. Stay with him. Give him time with his father. Then come home to us. It makes sense. He didn't want to agree. I could see him working through the angles, trying to figure out if there was some trap here. But in the end, his arrogance won out. He believed I had forgiven him. He believed I was being reasonable, even understanding. He believed his plan had worked. All right, he finally said. If you think that's best, but you'll come back, eventually, to visit, so the children can know Tobenna? I said nothing to that. I looked at Obiageli. Does Tobenna know about us? About my children? He knows his father lives in America. He knows he has a wife there and children, but he does not know you are here. He does not know he just met his siblings. She paused. I think he suspected at the airport. He is a perceptive child. What did you tell him about why his father cannot be with him full time? She shifted, uncomfortable for the first time. I told him his father has important work in America, that he provides for us from there. You told him his father chose work over him. I told him the truth. Chike has obligations in America. We knew that from the beginning. I nodded slowly, another victim of Chike's selfishness. A boy who had spent 12 years wondering why his father chose to live an ocean away, not knowing that his father had simply chosen to maintain two separate lives rather than deal with the consequences of his actions. That evening, I told Chike that our flight home was booked for the following afternoon. He hugged the children goodbye, promised them he would be home soon, told them he loved them. They accepted his embraces woodenly, no longer sure what to believe from him. The next morning, Tobenna came to say goodbye. It was awkward, this child looking at his half-siblings, all of them aware now of their connection, but not knowing how to relate to each other. He was a sweet boy, polite and well-mannered, and my heart hurt for him. He was losing his father too, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. "Maybe I can visit America someday," he said shyly to the twins. "Papa says I could come for summer vacation." Zara and Kendi looked at me, and I saw the question in their eyes. I smiled at Tobenna. "Maybe someday." Another lie, but a kind one. He didn't need to know that once I was done, his father wouldn't have money for international vacations. Chike drove us to the airport. In the car, I played my role perfectly. I was the forgiving wife, sad to leave him but understanding of his need to spend time with Tobenna. I promised to call when we landed. I told him I loved him. The lies came easily now. At the airport, he kissed me goodbye one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything. But we'll make this work. I know we will." "I know," I lied. He kissed each of the children, and then we were through security in the departures area, where he couldn't follow. The moment we were out of sight, I felt the tension drain from my body. We were leaving. The flight home was long, but uneventful. The children slept much of the way, exhausted by everything. I stayed awake, reviewing my plans. As soon as we landed, I would contact Patricia Chen. She would file the divorce papers immediately. With the evidence I had, with Obiageli's testimony, with the documentation of Chike's financial abuse, I would win. I would get full custody. I would get half of everything he had tried to hide. And most importantly, I would get my freedom. We landed in Houston on a Saturday evening. I called Patricia from the airport. "File everything," I told her. "I have all the evidence. I'm ready." "Consider it done," she replied. "The papers will be filed Monday morning." I took my children home to our house, the house that Chike thought was his, but that was actually marital property. I put them to bed in their own rooms, in their own beds. They clung to me, still processing everything, but calmer now that we were home. "What happens now?" Kendi asked as I tucked her in. "Now we start over," I told her. "Just the four of us. We build a new life, a better life. Without Daddy? Without the version of Daddy who lies. If he can become someone honest, someone trustworthy, then maybe someday he can be part of our lives again. But that's a long way off, baby. For now, it's us. And that's enough." She nodded and closed her eyes. I went to my own room, the room I had shared with Chike for 15 years, and began packing his things. I wanted every trace of him out of the house before he returned. Chike called me Sunday morning, still in Lagos. "Did you make it home safely?" "We did. Everything is fine." "I miss you already. I'll be home in 2 weeks. We can start fresh then." "I'm looking forward to it." The lies were getting easier. Monday morning, Chike was served with divorce papers. He called me, screaming, demanding to know what I had done. I had expected anger. I hadn't expected the sheer panic in his voice. "Amara, what is this? You said you forgave me. You said we would work through this." "I lied," I said calmly. "The same way you lied to me for 13 years. How does it feel?" "You can't do this. The papers say you're asking for full custody, for half of everything, for spousal support. You can't take my children." "Watch me. I have evidence of your affair. I have evidence that you've been financially supporting another family throughout our marriage. I have testimony from Obiageli about your relationship. I have proof that you closed our joint accounts and tried to hide assets before bringing me to Nigeria. Any judge who sees what you've done will rule in my favor." "Obiageli told you she would testify?" His voice was strangled. "She wouldn't do that. She loves me. She loved the man she thought you were. She doesn't love the coward and liar you actually are. Neither of us do. I'll fight you. I'll fight you for custody. I'll fight you for the money. Go ahead. Fight. You'll lose. And every time you fight, more people will find out what you did. Your colleagues at the hospital, your friends, everyone will know that Dr. Chike, the respected cardiologist, is actually a man who maintained two families for over a decade, who lied to everyone, who committed financial abuse against his wife. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, what do you want? I want what I'm entitled to. Half of everything. Full custody with you getting supervised visitation until you prove you can be trusted. And I want you to pay back every penny you sent to Obiageli over the years. That was marital money, spent without my knowledge or consent. That's impossible. I don't have that kind of liquid cash. Then you'll sell your properties. You'll liquidate your investments. You'll figure it out. Or the court will figure it out for you. Amara, please, you're destroying me. No, I said, my voice hard. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. I hung up. He called back repeatedly, but I didn't answer. My lawyer would handle all communication from now on. I was done talking to him, done listening to his excuses and manipulations. The divorce was brutal and public, exactly as I intended it to be. Chike tried to fight, tried to claim that Obiageli and I were conspiring against him, tried to paint himself as the victim of two vengeful women. But the evidence was overwhelming. Every email, every bank transfer, every lie documented and presented to the court. His reputation was destroyed. Word spread through his hospital, through his social circles. He became the subject of gossip, of judgment. His medical practice suffered. Some patients requested new doctors. Some of his colleagues distanced themselves from him. He was asked to step down from a prestigious position on a medical board. Everything he had worked so hard to build crumbled. The financial settlement took months to finalize. In the end, I got full custody of the children with Chike getting supervised visitation every other weekend. I got the house, half of all his investments and retirement accounts, and enough in spousal support to maintain our standard of living. He was ordered to pay back half of what he had sent to Obiageli, nearly $600,000, which he could only manage by selling his Nigerian properties. The life he had tried to maintain in Lagos evaporated. Obiageli kept her word throughout. She testified, provided evidence, stood firm even when Chike begged her to recant. Afterward, she called me one last time. "It's done," she said simply. "He can no longer hurt either of us. What will you do now?" "I have taken a full-time position with a company here in Lagos. Good pay, good benefits. Tobenna and I will be fine, better than fine. We will be free." "Does Tobenna understand?" "He understands that his father made bad choices that hurt a lot of people. He is angry, hurt, confused. But he will heal. Children are resilient." "They are," I agreed, thinking of my own three, who were slowly returning to themselves, slowly learning to trust again. "Thank you, Obiageli, for helping us." "Thank you," she replied, "for showing me that I did not have to accept crumbs, that I deserved more." We said goodbye, two women who would probably never speak again, but who had helped each other escape the trap one man had set for both of us. A year after that day in the Lagos airport, I stood in the kitchen of our house, the house that was now legally mine alone, making breakfast for my children. They chattered around me, fighting over the last waffle, laughing at something Dare had said. They were okay. Not perfect, still healing, still in therapy processing their father's betrayal, but okay. Chike saw them every other weekend, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. The visits were stiff, awkward. The children were polite but distant. They had not forgiven him, and I wondered if they ever would. That was between them and him. I no longer tried to manage their relationship with their father. That was his responsibility, his to repair if he could. I had gone back to school, using some of the settlement money to get certifications that would let me re-enter the pharmaceutical industry at a higher level. I had job interviews lined up. I was rebuilding a career, rebuilding a life, rebuilding myself. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Patricia Chen, my attorney, who had become something of a friend through this process. "Saw the final accounting report. He paid the last installment. You're done." I smiled. Done. After a year of legal battles, of court dates, of fighting for every penny and every right, I was finally done. Cheek had paid back what he owed. The divorce was final, settled, complete. I looked around my kitchen, at my children, at the life I had rebuilt from the ashes of my destroyed marriage. I thought about that woman who had stepped off a plane in Lagos, naive and trusting, walking into a trap. She was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who would never again put blind trust in anyone, someone who knew her worth and would fight to protect it. Zara looked up from her waffle. "Why are you smiling, Mama?" "Because we made it, baby. We survived, and now we get to thrive." "Is this about Daddy?" "It's about us. About knowing that no matter what happens, we can handle it. We're stronger than we knew." Kendi raised her juice glass in a mock toast. To being strong. Dare, not quite understanding but wanting to participate, raised his glass too. To being strong. Zara joined them, and finally, I did too, all four of us toasting to survival, to strength, to the future we would build together. We had walked into a trap, but we had escaped it. And now, finally, we were free. Please tell me what you thought of the story in the comments below. And if you liked this tale, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me to keep creating these wonderful stories. Until tomorrow, all my love.